We're going to talk about baby steps and collaboration, the how and why of that, and I'm really excited to have this group up here. They're going to talk about it from different perspectives. And first, we're going to have Leslie talk about it. Leslie it's not marketing at Rock Health, it is marketing. Outreach, connection. She set up a video series, education, and so on at Rock Health, which is a health incubator in San Francisco. How long has Rock Health been around? A year, so just a year. And I wanted to get her perspective on collaborations and partnerships, and then we'll have Ellen and Julia next. Leslie, take it away. Please welcome Leslie.
All right. We ready to go? Cool. So I'm going to talk to you about what we've done at Rock Health in the last year since we have officially been in existence. We've been obviously doing things behind the scenes for a bit longer, but we're actually coming up on our 1-year anniversary, actually like June 1st, which is pretty exciting for us. I'm going to talk to you about building a culture of innovation with 99% turnover, which is actually what we have. So for those of you who don't know us, we are a nonprofit. We do kind of 3 different things. We run an incubator, which is what most people know about us. So we take in early stage companies who are building products and companies in digital health. We incubate them for 5 months. We give them money. We give them access to our network of partners. And then we have a demo day at the end where hopefully they get funded, which is really exciting for us. We also do events designed to bring together great people like you. I see a lot of familiar faces, so I know a lot of you have actually attended our events in the past. And then we also do research designed just to bring together thought leaders in this space, get perspectives, look into areas where we think that there's a lot of potential and perhaps people aren't really looking at the right questions. So we work with partners like Excel, NEA, venture capital, hospitals like the Mayo Clinic, Harvard, UCSF. And then we work with really incredible entrepreneurs who are building things like an attachment that goes onto your iPhone that actually turns it into an otoscope so you can remotely diagnose ear infections. Or one of our companies this term who actually has developed a platform that turns your camera into a vital sign detection sensor, which is really, really neat. So it passively tracks everything, which I think has been mentioned a couple times today and something we're really interested in at Rock Health. So here's a quick rundown of a few of the highlights. So we've been around for 1 year. We've done these reports for a bit. They've been pretty successful. We've never spent any money on marketing, not $1. And we've pulled off some pretty cool events. We have 36 companies that we've touched so far as part of our program, and they've raised a combined $8 million so far that's been announced that we can talk about. So it's pretty exciting stuff. And until about 2 weeks ago, we only had 3 employees. So we kind of did all of these things with a pretty lean team. One of my colleagues, Claire, is actually here today with me. So you may be asking yourself, how in the world can 3 people do all of this stuff? And we often ask ourselves the same thing. But I'm going to share with you kind of the 4 pathways that we have used to really build a successful and memorable digital health brand, and kind of the baby steps along the way that you can use to do the same, whether you're working at a startup or a big institution. So to illustrate this first point, I'm going to start with a story, actually my story. So this is me. I was 27, had a pretty successful career in advertising, working on Red and Starbucks, big brands. DDB and McCann Erickson were 2 of the agencies I've worked at. And I was perfectly healthy. No cavities, no broken bones, no nothing. And then, as all things do, it changed. And this is actually one of my scans from my colonoscopy. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis at age 27, which was pretty jarring, and I became very intimately aware of all of the problems that exist in healthcare. So as a designer, it's pretty appalling to walk into a doctor's office and see all of the opportunities from, the piece of paper you're given to do colonoscopy prep the night before to, the atrocity that is the hospital gown, which has not been redesigned since the 1920s. And let's be honest, it's really embarrassing. It's bad enough you're going in for a colonoscopy. The least they can do is cover you up. I think that's one of the big problems in health, actually, is we don't know the problem until it's too late, and we're already interfacing as either a patient or a caregiver, and it's a pretty jarring experience. So this is kind of what led me to leave advertising, actually, for the startup world. And kind of the first point that I wanted to talk about today is it's people like me entering healthcare. So, the first thing that we do at Rock Health that we think is really important is we really try to embrace diverse minds. So our goal as a nonprofit is to bring people from outside of healthcare in. So technologists, designers, whoever that has a great idea, has been personally touched by it, and can build a successful company, those are the types of people that we really want to draw in. And I think our entrepreneurs are great examples of this. They come from places like Google and IDEO, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Australia, Berkeley, the UK, China. So really, we're a very international community. We have a lot of diverse backgrounds, and we all really learn a lot from each other. The things that they all have in common are they're very resilient people. They're very persistent. They excel in their own distinct areas, whether they're developers or designers, in areas that aren't directly related to health all the time. So who are some of these people? This is Sean Ahrens, which actually, if any of you run around the Health 2.0 scene in San Francisco, you've probably met. He gets around in a good way. He has a company called Healthy Labs, and the first kind of spin-out that they created is called Chronology. And it's basically a patient-driven database of different symptoms and solutions for those with chronic GI conditions, which obviously is near and dear to me as a patient. So they're trying to build this database in the spirit of really creating more crowdsourced medicine, which is really exciting. Sean's background is coding. He went through Y Combinator, which is another accelerator here in San Francisco or actually Silicon Valley, that you guys may have heard of. And, really fantastic developer, but decided that he really wanted to translate his own experiences into a product that was going to improve different people's lives. And it took going through Y Combinator, figuring out he didn't want to build a consumer healthcare company, to realize this and get him here. Second example is one of our companies this term. So you probably recognize this guy on the left. One of our companies is founded by a guy named Michael Pan, and he was actually a DreamWorks animation employee. So he was working on the rendering side of things, taking really large images and compressing them and making them accessible on the fly for animators so that they could work on films like Shrek and Kung Fu Panda, which was pretty cool. No medical background whatsoever, just a really kick-ass developer. And his brother is actually a radiologist at Harvard. And his brother said, well, gosh, Michael, could you do this for health, you think? How would you feel about taking medical images, making them accessible? And so Michael has founded Nefosity, which is this really neat company that takes huge medical images, makes them accessible on the tablet, and allows doctors to collaborate remotely on the fly, wherever they are, all through this iPad database, which is also a really beautiful and lovely to play with thing. So, I think these two guys, they're both very different. They come from different backgrounds, which is one thing that we've really learned, is every class that we have is different. We're on our second class right now, and their needs are different. Our first class was very designer-driven. Second class, not so much. We put a huge emphasis the first time around on, really putting design at the heart of what we did. We had a ton of workshops, and we said, great, this clearly worked for the first class. We have beautiful decks. They loved it. We did that for the second class. Guess what? Nobody liked it. So we had to switch things up really quickly. We had a Monday meeting. We have meetings every Monday where we get the whole group together, and we heard the feedback and decided, well, all right, we probably need to switch things up a bit. So this actually brings up my second principle that we kind of live by at Rock Health. So most of you know who Reid Hoffman is. He gets quoted a lot, but I think my favorite Reid Hoffman quote is, launch early enough that you're embarrassed by your 1.0 product release, which is absolutely true. Failures really teach you more than successes, and that's something that we really try to both embody as an organization and also, through the work that we do with our startups. So the notion of failing fast, I think, is something that's really kind of in Silicon Valley's DNA already, but also just something that's really important for us to emulate as an organization. So, actually when we started, we were told no an awful lot, 50 times. I mean, it was a very, very, very humbling process to just be told no a lot. But I think once you become really comfortable with failure and you can walk out of a meeting and go, well, all right, they said no, next, it's a really empowering thing. So getting comfortable with that as an organization, doing things on a small scale so that the ripple effects aren't felt too widely, but just having the freedom to fail is something that's really, really important. For our startups, every single company that we've had interact with us has come in, and 5 months later, they exit completely differently than when they started. Whether it's a business model, the design, something. There's something about them that's intrinsically different. And that's okay. In fact, it's a good thing. It's actually kind of why we invest in people and not just ideas. So we think that people are the real, transformative element here. So, when we look at teams, we really try to evaluate them based on, okay, yeah, you have to have a great idea, but also, are you the team to solve this problem? Which I think if you talk to any venture capitalists, if there are any in the room, I think they'll all tell you the same thing. Bet on the jockey, not the horse. So Sessions is actually a great example of this. They joined us this term, and it's actually probably really applicable for a lot of you. And if you want to sign up for them, it's joinsessions.com. It's completely phenomenal. So these guys, one of them's ex-Boxy design guys. They're really talented. They came in on day one of the program, flew in from Australia, and they were like, gosh, you know what? Our product sucks. Our idea sucks. I think we're going to start over. And they did, because they're really persistent guys, because they're resilient, and they tried, and they realized that they were wrong very early on. They made a pivot. And 4 months later, they already have a lot of paying customers. They have a product. It's going well. Rachel, who's working here at the event, is actually helping out with them, and you can ask her a bit more about what this product does if you're interested. But what does this process actually look like, this failing fast process? So this is Eric Ries. If you've been around Silicon Valley for a while, you probably know who he is. He wrote a book about the lean startup methodology, which is something he coined. If you're into that, he wrote a book about it. If you're not, here are the Cliff's Notes. Learn, build, measure, validate, and do it again. So these are the baby steps that you take to really, whether you're trying to figure out a new way to bring your employees together and build a better program to, get them to work together more effectively, or you're trying to build a product or service. This is really the process that you want to go through. The very notion of failing fast is all about baby steps, and it's not being afraid to go back and just try it again. So, and I think that there's another really interesting point that this brings up, which is that I think there's this perceived distance between what a healthcare startup is and what a tech startup is. And the reality is they're kind of the same. They're not kind of the same. They are the same. The process to get to a successful company is not that different. So, this means kind of getting to know your users, understanding the market thoroughly, all of those good things. How do you do that? Okay, this is Robert De Niro in The Godfather. You may be asking what he has to do with health. The answer is he is a pretty famous practitioner of something that they call method acting, which is completely immersing yourself in the character you're playing. So a lot of you tried the Nike Fuel Band, great start. You should probably do more if you're trying to really learn about this space. So again, this is me. I actually committed, I loved hearing Julie's story earlier. I committed to a whole quantified year, so I'm tracking pretty much everything. I've tried well over 20 products and apps to date. Everything from food tracking to genomics to blood chemistry sensing. This is actually me getting my WellnessFX test done, which is pretty cool. So now I know what works. I know the language. I can speak it with entrepreneurs. I can speak it with investors. It's really a good social currency. So really, these testing each other's products, sharing health data is something that's really key to what we do at Rock Health. Becoming part of each other's success builds a strong culture. And then really that brings me to the last point, which is cultivating this spirit of openness. We all give each other feedback. We don't take competitive ideas. So, our founders feel very comfortable working together. They do pitch practice with each other before demo day. But, we've created an environment in which it's okay to fail. It's okay to ask for help. And I think that that's really, really important. Everyone feels more invested in the end product when you're a team instead of siloed companies or individuals. So, to wrap things up, bring somebody from outside of your orbit in. Ask someone who's only tangentially maybe related to what you're doing for their advice or feedback. Don't be afraid to fail. You're going to learn a lot while you're doing it. And actually, I would love to challenge you guys. I don't have very much time left, but if you want to think about one challenge that you're facing right now, write it down, think about it, and think about how someone that you may not have thought to ask for help could help. Whether that's something business related, personally related. And really think about how more diverse minds can help with that. So I will leave you with that. You can find me here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leslie. We'll have some questions at the end. I want to introduce Ellen Levy next. Ellen and I were graduate students at the same time here at Stanford, and she went on to do some amazing things here in Silicon Valley. I'm going to use a metaphor to describe you. I'm not trying to quite have it right, but I see her as the Mozart of understanding how people should connect and how people and companies should be working together. So I know of nobody who's, I think, better and more of a genius than you are in having a sense of who should meet whom and how you should be working together. And I wanted you to share some of that insight and approach with us. So please welcome Ellen Levy. Right this way.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. One of the nice luxuries for me in terms of being able to speak now is that what I'm going to try to do over the next 10, 15 minutes is go through some of the frameworks and some of the very specific rules that I think guide almost all of these discussions, and then hopefully during the Q&A we can drill into any particular details that are helpful. But what I'm going to start with is to talk a little bit about the major trends. And I always hesitate to do that because it makes it sound like I want to start out sounding like a pundit, and that's not it at all. What I want to do is put a couple trends out there. You could pick many. I'm just going to pick 3 because I want to make the point that I think it's imperative that we do some of the things we're talking about, whether it's baby steps, whether it's iterate and learn and then develop again. Not because it might be a strategy you can take, but because if you don't take them, these things are around you and they're kind of forcing the issue irrespective of your approach. So it's whether you take advantage or whether you actually get harmed by not following. So those 3 trends. Let me start with the first one. The simple shorthand is that tech is changing access, right? The technology's out there, it changes access. But I mean access in all kinds of ways. I mean access in a time scale matter, right? And the anecdote I'll use, I was intrigued when I read this book. It was about a year or 2 ago I read it. And it's a fun little book called The Victorian Internet. And one of the things that struck me when I read it was that there was this story about when the telegraph was invented. And there were commodities traders in Chicago, and they painted the picture of their lives. This is just one little vignette from the book. And their lives were about every 6 months, a ship would come over from India with the spices and the goods, et cetera, and then everything would change, prices and understanding of the flow of goods, et cetera. And all of a sudden, the information would come in daily, not every 6 months. Can you imagine the change in terms of the way you thought about what you had to do and how you think about it? So the fact that information comes to us in rapid time from lots of sources through lots of different mechanisms, time and the access in that dimension is hugely important to the way we think about what we're trying to deliver and what problems we're trying to solve. The second one is about the physical access. We have access through new devices such as mobile. We have access by understanding your location, et cetera. Technology is enabling a whole bunch of areas where we might not have even had to consider those as variables before. The next piece about access is access to information. And personally, I'm incredibly intrigued by the variable of information and access when it comes to health, because I think that it's an incredibly powerful opportunity, whether it's direct information to the primary facts about your health, or whether it's the second order information, things that I associate, so that I've taken, 7,000 steps today on my Fitbit. I never needed to know the number 7,000 before, but somehow I get a mapping that starts to let me know, and information is an incredibly powerful tool, but it's one that has to be managed well. It's not data, it's information. Let's remember the distinction. And the last piece under tech access is access to people. I don't care if you're a company and all of a sudden you might have been part of a supply chain before, a B2B player. I think B2B is a concept that still needs to be managed, but it's B2B to C. It's your problem whether you're a direct-to-consumer player or whether you're a person playing along in the food chain to understand that end consumer. And that end consumer can also be the person who does your market research for you, like we saw today with the pilot that just happened. So the access to people is why it makes it imperative that we think about behavior. You can't think about people if you don't understand psychology and the behavior, the same way we can't acknowledge that time course has changed without figuring out that we have to iterate and sample on a much more rapid scale. The second major trend that I'm intrigued by, and of course my bias is that I've been involved with the company LinkedIn since it was founded 9 years ago, and recently just stopped working at the company full-time as of 2 weeks ago. So this notion that there are now networks of people is a very significant change. And it's not that we didn't have networks before, but we can leverage them and understand them and feel the tangibility of them in ways that we couldn't. And that means access to customers. It means crowdsourcing of ideas. It means finding influencers or people who will get me to change my behavior or at least gain reputation from doing things that matter. Leveraging those networks becomes incredibly important. And the third major trend is that customers come first. I know we've had that mantra forever. It sounds like I'm bringing up a phrase that gets spit out every 15 years in business. But now it really means customers come first. I don't care if your customer is your patient, your client, your customer, your business partner, right, or somebody who you collaborate with. But that means it's about psychology, and it means it's about understanding people. And the second thing it means is that if you are going to be about the individual or the person first, you must reduce complexity for them. We used to say, imagine the cell phone companies. I don't know if anybody's had this experience, but I had this one about a year or two ago. I called and said, my calendar is not showing the data that I have that I know exists in my calendar up in the cloud. And I went to Apple store and I asked, and they said, well, I think it's a syncing problem. So then I went to the AT&T store and they said, no, I think it's an app problem. So then I went to Microsoft and said, well, I'm working on Outlook over here and it's not, and they said, well, but you're syncing to Apple's iCal. Now, that's basically telling the customer it's their problem to solve complexity, right? In today's world, I think the winners will be the ones who've already figured out that it needs to feel like a black box to the individual, to the user. And to the extent you can make that true, two things happen. One, it's a delightful experience for the customer, but two is it says it is incredibly important to figure out how the companies delivering a joint service, if there are dependencies, know how to work well with each other. And that's why I think this focus on partnership and collaboration is going to take center stage, not just because my career in the business sector has been around business development and corporate development, but because I think now the imperative is on the companies to figure it out to make the experience most importantly and valuable for the individual. Okay, the second thing I wanted to talk about is to run through a couple of the implications. So I've set this, hopefully that at least gives a hint of why I think it's imperative to focus on these issues. First implication I just alluded to is this notion of complexity going up, and yet the complexity should be shouldered or worked through by the companies delivering services. Right? And that's that need for collaboration and partnerships. Unless you're going to go and try to be one thing, do all things to deliver the service, and a fully integrated offering is really hard to do. Very few people have accomplished it. So figuring out who your partners and collaborators could be may mean recognizing that some of your competitors also have a valuable piece that has to be delivered. And how do you do that kind of collaboration? The second implication is that we have to also recognize that there are new models for how products are delivered. Right? Some of the comments we've already heard, even just in this panel, but in the earlier sessions yesterday and then this morning, is that there's this notion of throw something out there and see if it works. Iterate, try, figure it out. That's great if you're a 3-person company and you're going to pivot. What happens the day you also had business development people trying to flesh out a contract and say what's going to happen and who delivers what? We don't know. We don't know what's going to work. Let's figure it out. So I'm going to get that point after I give a little more elaboration on the product piece. The second thing in the product piece is that very rarely do products in isolation stay in isolation for very long. And I mean two things by that. One, I mean as a business model for how each company, organization, service offering grows. That's going to change because you keep trying to figure out how to help your consumer more. The second thing is the notion that if you're trying to build for a customer, actually, I can do it best by an example. There was a professor here at Stanford who did some research a couple years ago, and he happened to be studying the AOL Instant Messenger tool. And what was interesting was when he talked to AOL about it afterwards, AOL's quality assurance and customer service teams were working on it because at the time, a lot of people were leaving the service. And what he looked at was how do people use it in their natural settings? Well, what he found is Instant Messenger was open, and so was email, and they were talking on the phone, and the screen had about 4 things going on. AOL had never studied it outside of looking at their little window. And the world changes dramatically. It doesn't mean they were going to go solve everybody else's problems, but they at least had to understand their own in the context of everything else going on. And so that notion that product iteration is taking place, we need to make our partnerships follow that in the same way. And what I'm going to say today is that our old model of business development, partnership, et cetera, is going to be broken. It's already trying its best, but failing in a lot of ways. Let me give you the overly stereotypical version of a business development deal. We will sit down, we will try to negotiate a deal. We need to make sure that we go for at least 3 years to speculate what each of us will get out of it. And I need to know exactly what you're committing to giving to this partnership, because otherwise I'm not throwing my resources in the ring. And then we need to go run it by a committee who says, did we really extract what we needed from it? And all the while, the product and the customers, et cetera, have iterated 5 times over before we've even started to get the legal involved in the T's and the I's of the contract. So I look at it now and say, how do you start to think about partnerships? I mean, I love the name, partnerships and collaborations, I think is going to become the main discussion, not contracts and business development deals, because they just don't stand this iterative test of time that's now happening. Okay, so my rules for partnership, and I'm going to go through them quickly again. Hopefully we can pry into some of these as relevant. One, and I've alluded to this already, so they should be pretty quick and straightforward. Customers don't want to hear about your problems. Never mind learn your organization and your contracts to solve their problems, right? The onus on for that is on you. The second thing, actually, and I'll give an example here too, because I find it's in everyday life right now. I was at a restaurant the other day, simple little example, and I ordered a salad. Didn't seem like I was going to challenge them too much, and they said, I'm sorry, ma'am, we're out of the salad. And I thought, how can you be out of a salad? And they said, well, we actually run out of lettuce. And I sat there and I'm talking to my husband, and I said, there's a grocery store next door. Like, if I run and get the lettuce, do you think they'd make a salad for me? And yet no one in the restaurant had thought of it, right? This is how ridiculous it's gotten in terms of sticking to an old business of this is what we do versus this is how we deliver to a customer. And we're seeing success stories when people start to completely turn it around. I mean, I love Zappos for the way their vision has permeated the way they do a business that's been around for quite a while. But think about how silly it is and examples of those things, and then figure out how you can incorporate that into the way you do your business. The second one is that relationships matter, and they matter now more than ever because they are apparent to everybody who's using systems that let them use it and take advantage of it. So I have to do this because I'm a recovering LinkedIn person. Can I see a show of hands? How many people are on LinkedIn? Okay, so almost every person in this room is discoverable to me. Right? I would argue, so I have a network now that if you take out to my third degree, so I've connected to a handful of people on LinkedIn. My second degree is the number of people who I could get to through a mutual contact. And my third degree is I know somebody who knows the person I'm trying to get to. If you go to my third degree network right now, it is 18 million people. Okay? So if you believe that relationships matter and the people you're connecting with and then instantiating through these tools matter, what it means is that I could go and think about doing a business where I want to sell into China, and I could be talking to an expert in the market I care about in China tomorrow. Right? I could do the same thing in any country, in any industry, et cetera, because those networks span out in ways where fostering relationships are really important. My third rule is that the worst time to try to build a relationship is when you need something. This is not an immediate transaction, immediate gratification game. The best time to build a relationship is when there's nothing in it for you. And it's a really, really hard model for business to absorb. And the reason I say it's hard is because how do you justify that you spent time playing golf on the golf course? I mean, pick the worst example ever thrown out, right? Well, I got my first job out of grad school because I met somebody on the golf course. And in fact, I've actually had entrepreneurs when I was a VC get deals into major businesses and launch within 6 months because I was talking to the CIO of a company who then heard my thinking, who then met. These relationship building activities have to be valued because you can't simply rely on transactions. It's almost too late to try to build the trust that's going to enable you to do these collaborations versus just contractual obligations. The last one is, if you are going to do these deals, I have a quick rule of making sure you at least do the basics you need. And my basic rule, if I only have one, is what I call the wishbone test. At the end of the day, if you have to think about the downside risk of separating, who gets the fat end? Define what your fat end of the wishbone is if we're going to split up. Maybe it's direct access to the customer. Maybe it's access to the data. Maybe it's access to the partnerships that were co-signed together. I don't know what it is, but at least make sure you understand where your core dependencies are and the things you're most critically dependent on. It will help you figure out how to establish the partnership, and it certainly helps you manage the downside risk. And the last thing is an anecdote I just heard, which I love. I didn't come up with this. But for years now, I've been thinking about the concept of what does it mean to talk about ROI, right? And BJ knows this from I ran a program here at Stanford for a couple years. I had coined the term the true ROI of university industry government collaboration. And at the time I said, well, the great thing is ROI, everyone in business says, this is awesome. Finally, somebody at the university is talking about ROI. And I said, here's the problem. You think I mean return on investment because you're in business. I think in the academic research circles, et cetera, it's good in one context to think of it as research of interest. That is what motivates people, and this is about motivating people. And the third part is when government and nonprofits, et cetera, get involved. The good shorthand, again, there's always exceptions, is that it means results of importance. right? And the trick is going to be how you map the R's and the I's. But the quote that I just heard is we talk about how do we get ROI. I'd say we need to define ROI carefully, but it's ROI versus COI. And what they meant when they said it, which I love, is it's return on investment or whatever definition you use versus cost of inaction. Right? Doing nothing is worse in a lot of cases than being a little ambiguous or trying to still pin down all the ways you believe that there's an ROI. And again, that's a personal bias, but I think we're going to see it playing out over and over as we try to sort out these new models. Stop there.
How would you feel if you walked into the Apple store and you looked, and it's packed, as they always are, and you looked up on the shelf and there was your product? That was your brainchild, boom, right there. Or somebody calls you and says, I was just in Best Buy, and I saw what you created. How awesome would that be? Julia's going to come tell us about that. Come on up, Julia. Julia is the founder and CEO of LARK. Julia did a couple of degrees here at Stanford, and then you went to MIT to do an MBA, and what happened?
I dropped out.
Confess?
I dropped out.
Okay, and you did?
I started LARK.
Awesome. Take it away.
Thanks, VJ. It's amazing to see the trends of partnerships, because that's kind of what I fell into. So today I really want to talk about how we went from a prototype to Apple shelves and retail shelves in 1 year with a hardware product. And a little bit of background. So LARK, we help people sleep better. So we do 3 things well. It's a wristband that silently wakes you up. So you don't have to wake up your partner or your roommate. And you let them sleep in. And it wakes you up much more refreshed than usual. Then, throughout the night, this is actually taking thousands of data points per minute. And the moment you wake up, you get to see how you slept and the easiest ways to improve. Because the top sleep experts in the world are looking at your data, finding patterns, and understanding you are this type of sleeper. Based on our knowledge, the easiest ways you can improve your sleep and hopefully your life are these simple things you can do, baby steps. So we started on this idea, and I actually went to MIT, and I dropped out June of 2010. That was my summer break. I was going to try this thing out. So we went to, moved to Silicon Valley again, and worked in a little group, and we just wanted to get something out there. And so we gave ourselves a year, and within a year, we launched into all Apple stores in America. And since then, we've rolled out to all Apple stores in the world. And today, I really want to talk about how you build a product, but not in the traditional sense. How you build a revolutionary product through evolution, rather than getting it right in the first try. And I think that there's 3 major components to doing this. First, you really have to find what your minimum shippable great product is. And second, I've found that using software and using the benefits of what mobile has given us is amazing to make a product great. And the third is really what Ellen was talking about. How do you find those right partnerships that can enable you to become something much larger? So, minimum shippable great solution. What is that? I think it's like, first, have a set of problems. The second is make sure you're solving them in the right order, taking the chunks that you can first. And then the third is actually making sure it's shippable. So what do I mean by that? This is a little bit embarrassing. This is me and my fiance. This was actually my problem. I didn't start with this idea of solving the world's sleep problems. I started with this idea. Jeff actually fell asleep in a restaurant we were at, and And he, it's because he didn't get enough sleep every night. He didn't believe in it. He said, I'm a busy person, I'm proactive, I don't need sleep, I can sleep when I die. And so as a result, he would wake me up at 5:30 every single morning with his alarm clock. And guess what? He would be snoozing, and I would just wake up, and I would lose, a quarter of my sleep a day, an hour and a half of my sleep. And I became the grumpy one. I became the uncreative one, and the one that started gaining weight. And so this was my problem, and I started pinpointing that problem. What was it? It was simply to get him to allow me to sleep in. And that was the main thing. How do I do that? And then I said, okay, well, I can dream some more. He has bad sleep habits too. Maybe I can help him sleep better. Maybe I can convince him that sleep is important, that he has some issues. So I had all of these problems that I could solve, but really it's about putting them in the right order of solving. So I would say that when you try to figure out what is the right order of solving a problem, I think of it as an hourglass. So the first thing that you should do is have that dream of why should I dedicate myself and years of my life to this problem? And the dream for me was, okay, what if I could help the whole world understand and improve their sleep, which I think is one of the cruxes of life. All right, that's well and nice. Where do I start? Well, I'm going to start with allowing Jeff to not piss me off in the morning by waking me up with his alarm clock. And so that's the place that you start. That's your first minimum shippable product. And then you say, okay, in order to get this minimum shippable product kind of pushed into the right direction, how can I evolve that? And that's really the roadmap that you kind of create for you. So on the product world, it's very much the same thing. You have to figure out what problems do you want to solve in the right order. And in the beginning, it's the dream phase. How can I build a silent alarm clock that wakes him up and not me? Well, actually, my great idea in the beginning was earplug alarm clocks. I'm so glad I didn't build those, but actually I did, and we tossed them out. So we built vibrators, we built necklaces, we built belts, we built all sorts of things. And the first thing to get right is the form and the electronics. The second is, once you kind of figure out the form, then it's really time to focus. And you just want to focus on all the details of how this could be the best alarm clock it could be. And then that's productizing the initial solution. And finally, it's allowing there to be a growth path, evolving the initial solution into a sleep program, into something that could help you improve your sleep. So I'll talk a little bit about this in the next section. And all the while, you want to figure out, is my shippable initial product actually worth it to other people? And because it's a product, you need to get people to pay for it. So the gut check is, will people pay for this? Is the problem that I'm solving and the solution good enough that people will pay an amount that's probably 2 to 4 times the cost of what I'm building it for? And so you have to understand that the enabling technology that underlies your solution has to match the problem and the solution. So how do you get software to make hardware and products great? And I think this is such an exciting time in our society when we're allowed this revolution. Startups can finally not suck at product. If you think about products before our time, you think, Sony, how many millions of dollars in focus groups did they have to get to make sure that the features that they put in their digital camera, the colors that they chose, the firmware was completely robust to actually make a product? startups don't have the luxury of time or money. And so what the mobile revolution really does is it puts this software cycle, which is 1 to 2 months fast, onto this product cycle, which is much longer in time scale, 12 to 18 to years, and allows us to iterate quickly. So I think it's a great time to make a product a little at a time. And I'll just show you the way that we made sure that our hardware product was good was just that it could deliver the data robustly. We had a sleep monitor. As long as it could deliver the data, we made the brains the software. And we launched with one screen. I mean, literally, this was embarrassing, but we launched with one screen, which was the moment you wake up, this is the magical data that you get. And then we started hearing from our customers through forums, through interviews. What does this actually mean? Is 25 times actually healthy? How much should I be sleeping? And so we started building a context around that with sleep experts to show you, how you could easily improve. And then the second launch after that, and this was, 4 or 5 months after we actually launched, we said, okay, data is not enough. Why don't we mimic what sleep experts actually do, which is get your data of how you sleep and give you therapy and coaching on how to improve your sleep. And so then we launched with a personal sleep coach, which after we get data from you for 7 days, we actually tell you the easiest ways to improve. So the product cycle is really very, very different when we build software, hardware products now. And in the past world, products, you just had to predict solutions, you had to make things really simple, one-use gadgets, and you had to make solutions really robust. But now with software and the power of mobile, you can innovate, you can take risks, you can experiment with your products. And I think it's truly important for startups. And the third is really building the right partnerships. So it's pretty amazing. I see the world in 3 groups. You want to build your core defensible team, and those are your employees. They're hardworking, they work like a dog, they're smart and hungry. Your contractors, they know how to get the job done, they've done it before, so they're really just, executing for you. And then you have these partners. Partners are a magical group because they allow you opportunities to grow synergistically, to use your networks, to create new models. And these are where the strategies are really born. And one of my favorite moments, people ask me, why did I feel confident enough to drop out of MIT when I had $2,000 in the bank, we had no real prototype yet, I had no funding, and I actually look back and I say, it's because I had a partner, and I had a thought partner. But basically, PCH was this incredible company. They make the gadgets for the largest companies in the world, their manufacturing partner. And one night, I wrote to Liam, the CEO of this very large company, and at 1:00 a.m. at night, he calls me up. I never met him, and he's like, I'm going to fly to America 2 days from now. Meet me at Pete's Coffee. And so here I was. I pitched him this idea, and he was like, I've always wanted to help startups. I'm kind of bored of just working with large companies, but it'd be great to start up an incubator, like a YC for hardware startups. And I said, oh, I've ran an incubator before. I could be your guinea pig company. And that was the partnership. There was no contract for 6 months. We had no idea how he was going to make money from this. But there was a lot of courage. There was a lot of trust. And it was building a long-term relationship. And since then, we have been able to create the PCH Accelerator, which helps other companies now come to fruition, like us. And without these, It's really so hard to build a company which relies on so many other pieces. So I just want to end with this. You know, we were so excited. Like last month, Fast Company named us one of the top 10 most innovative consumer electronic companies in the world. And we all kind of chuckled because the secret for startups is that innovation is the only way for survival. It's not a choice. It's life. And so, you know, I urge you guys to just take this philosophy of continuing to innovate and, you know, echoing what everyone says here. So thank you guys so much.
Alrighty. I've got some rapid-fire questions for you all, and then we'll take some from the audience. How do you know, so we're going to talk about partnerships and collaborations, and yesterday's session about this really kind of showed it was a nerve, it was a hot button for the group, more than I expected even. How do you know if a partnership or collaboration is a good idea? How do you sense the chemistry, right?
I mean, I think you know after just a few minutes of spending time, like if you're kind of culturally aligned, if you have generally the same goals in mind, if you're able to act quickly. I mean, especially for us, I would say, like, you know, we work with 15 partners spanning hospitals, venture capital, corporations, and we know pretty quickly, you know, if they're looking for, if we're both kind of looking for the same thing out of it, if we can clearly define what we both want to get, and then, you know, it follows.
So it's like a Starbucks meeting or you're in somebody's boardroom and they're in
Yeah, or they come visit the accelerator, they say, wow, this is really cool. We would like to emulate this, or we would like to source new people.
Could you know at an event like this, you got to lunch and you talk to somebody for 15 minutes and you say, oh, I've got to go get my +3, see you later. Could you know within that window maybe?
I mean, sure, yeah, you have love connections when you meet for lunch. I think you can.
Ellen.
So there's a mobile LinkedIn app, so I would check them out on LinkedIn, and if I didn't know them, I'd see.
So you'd sit there and go, pull them up on LinkedIn.
Sometimes.
I got to go to the bathroom.
Go to the bathroom is a good one.
Okay.
But no, joking aside, if I don't know you, but the 10 people we know in common are people I admire, trust, and think they are high-quality business people that are ethical and reputable, that tells me a lot the minute we sit down to have lunch. Yeah. Right. The second thing is I look at it more as how do I quickly rule out bad partnerships. Those are the nice thing is those happen quickly. And for me, one of the things I really like is when you start figuring out that you're in a conversation where the person you're talking to is trying to figure out what makes you, you know, like if I'm talking to you, I'm saying, what makes you successful? What are you going to need to make this work? Whether it's to have your superiors approve it or be able to deliver economically. Because if I'm worrying about your problems and you're worrying about my problems, I think it's a good sign. And so even early on, if that's the kind of probing that's happening, it's an incredibly positive sign for how those might play out.
Let's go back to the rule out. What are the red flags? It's like, yep, not working with this person, our company.
Again, if there is no indication that there is interest in what's going to make me successful, if you're talking to me, it's not about being selfish. It's that's the way the partnership's going to have to work. I always use the example, if you think about in acting, I learned this one time and I just can't get the idea out of my head. It's a cool, applicable one. In acting, if we are in a fight scene and you're strangling me, what I found out was that the actors, if I'm the one being strangled, I'm pulling your hands into my neck. And you're actually pulling your hands away from my neck. And it creates the imagery as if there's every bit as much tension as if you're choking me. That's the equivalent I want in a partnership.
Interesting.
Right? It's the exact opposite. No, but think about it. If I'm going, I gotta make you successful, because otherwise you walk away from this partnership, and you say, I gotta make you successful, it's gold. Then you explore, you figure out, I understand the little things that you need that may have been easy gives for me, but if somebody doesn't take any time to figure those out, you can't even start. If I start hearing all the things and all the demands, and you're gonna get everything you can in the kitchen sink, and then we'll whittle it down from there, it's a non-starter for me.
Interesting. Julia?
So I think there's two things as well that I look for. The first is this idea of trust. And if I can imagine if something goes south, which something will, that partnership, what would happen between the relationship of me and you? Would that deteriorate? Would that become hostile? And I want to avoid that. So it's really intrinsic, values of people. And the second is almost the flexibility of business model. I think right now there's a lot of, especially in mobile health, this idea of consumers and healthcare coming together. Are you as a partner willing to explore very, very different business models that are necessary for actual progress to happen? Because if you're only used to doing things in a very, very anachronistic way, it's impossible to form these new partnerships that require new business models. So I look for that flexibility and that creativeness in thinking.
The thing I'd add, by the way, this sounds all well and good. There are times when you just go, I like you, I think you're a great person, I'm not seeing the fit, trying to call those early.
And you just say that out loud.
Yeah, you just say, look, I think your model requires you're going to have to do some things that I can't justify doing for my model to work. And then both sides should leave and realize either you reevaluate your model because something's not right and you felt like you should be able to do it, or you realize that some partnerships aren't meant to be.
Okay. I'll probably regret asking this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Are women better than men at this?
Well, we're a team of all women, so I would of course say yes to that. But no, I mean, I don't think that there's a huge difference between the gender. I think men can be a bit more direct. I think it's something as women we actually need to work on. We have a group of women that we've kind of established in health, and it's actually a big thing that we talk about, which is like, how do you in meetings, especially with men, especially as a young woman, how do you be very direct about what you want? How do you ask for what you want? I think as women, we don't often ask for exactly what we want in business settings.
Okay. Anybody else want to go for that?
This is like the Larry Summers question you don't answer. No, for those who remember that. No, if you think about everything as having a distribution curve, I do think the data does suggest that the curve representing women and the curve representing men, there are some tendencies en masse that are different. I think a collaborative consensus building instinct, I think has been shown to be slightly more, that you shift the distribution curve to doing it more on female versus male. But again, this is almost one of those discussions where you're like, but if you take any one gentleman sitting in the audience, you could be the tail of distribution that blows everybody away. I think, again, you probably could see some tendencies.
Julie, you want to touch that one?
So it's kind of funny. So we have a company of around 20 now, and it's pretty half and half men and women. But because the culture people think of as a little bit female leading, and we were, I was asking someone, and they're like, hey, your culture is kind of different. You guys seem to like to talk about your feelings. And it's kind of funny because I think that partnerships, I think there's a lot of underlying, irrationality that is based on feelings and emotion and how I'm reacting to certain things. And perhaps, sometimes women care about those things more, so they notice them. But I think anyone who's self-aware and aware of the unspoken can be great at partnerships.
A bad partnership, I think, can kill a young company. It can kill an internal project. One bad partnership because you misinvested the resources, so on. How do you know, and let's say somehow oh my gosh, why did we get into this? How do you extract yourself from a bad partnership? And any of you can speak to that or not.
So I think that one of the hardest things in leading a company is firing someone. And it's that same feeling that actually doctors have when they tell their cancer patients that they're going to die. And the sooner you can figure out that there is it's like the fallacy of sunk cost. The moment that you say, oh my God, this has got to stop, you have to say, I'm just going to cut all costs and I'm going to extract myself, even though I've dedicated so much resources to the process.
I won't name the companies, but if I think of two incredibly strategic deals that I've had in place in two of my different roles, where we entertained them as multi-year partnerships and hugely strategic when we signed them, I think over time I've come to realize trying to not only anticipate, like I said, the wishbone test, but also actually negotiate an exit on the way in. It's the most pleasant time you're ever going to have talking about what if it goes wrong. It only gets worse from there, right? It's kind of, I jokingly say this. It's like, you know what, the next job, if I ever work for somebody else, I'll say, let's talk about how we're going to separate. Because I don't think it's ever going to happen, but we are so in love with each other right now that this is going to be really easy. Right? I will tell you I will expect this, and you tell me you'll expect that. And so in that second strategic partnership, we've done that. And given how important it was for both companies, it actually dissolved very gracefully. And I think that gets to be a much easier way of doing it, because it's only going to go downhill from there. Waiting until you're at odds with each other is, again, the worst time to do it.
Interesting. Leslie, anything that?
Well, I mean, I would say speed is really important. The startups that we work with, especially because they're so early, the sooner you can, to Julia's point, the sooner you can fire someone, firing fast, whether it's a partner or an employee, is really key to what you're doing, because the right thing will throttle it.
So we have, people as partners, getting rid of them, but also we've contracted with, a partnership with companies or, academic industry kind of collaboration. We've agreed it's not really working. Should you sever it or just grind it out and get it done?
Here's why I think it's gotten a lot harder, is because now it's not just an internal feud. You can see I like these little visuals that everyone can relate to. Remember the really terrible shows in the 70s where it was two parents and they were going to get divorced and they're fighting and they're bickering, and all of a sudden they look down and their 3-year-old has walked away and they don't know where the 3-year-old is? And for a moment they'd forgotten that that's actually what mattered. And so if you're sitting there and you're the two business partners and you're going, we're going to go at each other and we're going to separate, and it is terrible, and you forget your customer, you forget the patients, you forget the others. So going into them becomes that much more critical, because you can't just ignore the fact you've got other constituents that you're now trying to tend to. So honestly, I think sometimes you stick it out for that reason, even if it's detrimental. I think that's where the intelligence of what do you go into in the first place becomes way more critical.
Let's take a question or two. I have tons of more questions for you guys, but Pam, why don't you just say it and I'll repeat it. And let's cue somebody else up if we have time. Who else has a question?
Thank you for these insights. And you're largely talking about business. And as a researcher, I'm wondering if you have some examples of some successful collaborations between researchers, public health, especially, and companies where it's mutually beneficial and has a good health impact.
We've gotten several pilots in place, not only with our partners at the Mayo Clinic, but also UCSF, where our startups have been able to kind of, blaze this seamless pathway in, get pilots set up, actually do research around that, and then, successfully deploy in different departments. So I think it's, a matter of finding a champion, finding the right person, finding funding, which is always the challenge, and then making sure that, the right pieces are in place so that it can be really successful for both sides.
My example comes from when I ran the program here at Stanford called MediaX. So it was basically a matchmaking service between the industry interest and the people and tech research going on in the university. And that's where I came up with that multiple definitions of ROI. And, simple examples are sometimes getting a professor or a researcher to talk with industry. The thing that will get them most excited is they just had a book come out. So if I set up a speaking engagement where the company bought 200 copies of their book for all the attendees, that was the most exciting thing for the professor. It was the thing that mattered most at the time. And that person's insights and the willingness to fly out to the company and talk to was the thing that those folks wanted. Those are not the same returns, but figuring out what makes other side tick, I think there's incredible potential between that industry research side that we're just starting to take advantage of. Are you going to counter me? Don't give it back to her if she's going to refute me. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Julia, do you have a comment?
So we have amazing partners. So the people who created LARK with us, Sherry Ma, who is at Stanford, Dr. Salette, who is at Harvard. And what's great is they get to use a part of their brain that is not really used in research, which is all about 100% accuracy. And for us, it's about how do we impact that one little change of sleeping 15 minutes early. And so it's almost like this hopefully fulfilling experience where we get to work with them on how do you bring cutting edge research and make it relevant to everyday people, and they get to experience kind of a fast moving research environment or product development environment. And so we kind of fill each other's gaps, and so I think it's really important if you are a researcher and you want to see your work being impacting people, look for those companies and opportunities, seek advice advisorships, and work on creating products.
Please join me in thanking our speakers. Thank you. You guys just stay right here. I'm going to ask our speakers after we break, after Vinay updates us, to just kind of be here so people can come find you. And I'm sure we'll save some food for you. And if not, I'll buy you lunch another day. Vinay, come on up. What happened? So those of you who weren't here yesterday, Vinay, who heads up Daily Feeds, proposed some options for a product, real time. We're going to put it out there, test it, come back with some user data on the experience.
So, is this on? Yes. So we have some results, and just like Leela appears to be thinking, they're confusing in some regards. So we're happy, but not. I don't know. So let's kind of go through them. First, the big question that we tried to answer was, do intrinsic rewards work or do extrinsic rewards work? And here's the big reveal. Guess what? It doesn't matter. So remember, our success rate was whether people filled in their email address at the end and said they wanted to get an email from whoever this place was to learn how to stretch every morning. If you look at the click-through rates, they're slightly better on the intrinsic side. You can see that from the home page to clicking through to the next page, 66% of the people on the intrinsic side went through, 60% on the extrinsic side. But if you carry through the flow to the end, the last column there is when they signed in their email address, exactly the same. So my lesson here is stop debating intrinsic versus extrinsic. It's both. I think we've heard it a couple of times. It depends on the situation, depends on the person, depends on what you're offering, depends on what you're asking them to do. You can't take one camp or another. You have to evaluate both and test them. In this case, we tested both, and they're both the same. So we can try either one. So let's get into some more details. By the way, I'm using some technology here. I mentioned before Crazy Egg and Kissmetrics. Hiten Shah is here somewhere. He's really awesome. You have to use these tools. They will solve so much. Oh, he's up this afternoon. Awesome. So Crazy Egg tells you where people click on your site. This is kind of a heat map. And one thing I think you need to do when you look at this is you look at, some people did click, it's hard to see on this, but some people did click the lady stretching. So let's make that actionable. When they click that, let's take them to the next step. And so you can learn that. You would never know that without looking at something like this. So I think that's really useful data. I wanted to show you some user testing videos, just one real quick one actually. It's about 30 seconds. This allows you to record people's screens, and they tell you what they felt through the process of using your software. So this was, by the way, this was all done like over the last 10 hours, so this is really great feedback. This was done sometime in the middle of the night, I'm sure. So I'm going to hit play on this. Or not. Okay, let me refresh the browser.
It's a pretty short page.
Can we get the volume a lot higher? It's really a little low. Okay, let's try it again.
It's a pretty short page.
Can we get even higher?
Yeah,
All right, go.
It's a pretty short page. What do we got here? Campaign for America's Health. I don't know who this is. All right. Stretch right now and get a reward. All right. Stretching is transformative and it takes 6 minutes to do. Unlock a real. Well, you can unlock a real life reward if I stretch today. Cool. Sounds fun. I like to stretch. I'm glad there's no webcam here, so you can't see what I'm doing, but I'll stretch. Yeah, am I interested? Absolutely. That's next.
So the idea here is that you can often gain really interesting insights by hearing somebody talk about your product. And do it in a way that you're not sitting in front of them evaluating them. They just do this at their home. And you could see the inflection in his voice. Oh my God, rewards? And he's got a little accent there, I don't know where it's from. But the idea, though, is that you can understand what really interests people, what words pop out in their head. You wouldn't be able to figure that out by looking at numbers on a page. You have to look at what people do. The next question, and you guys all said this, and I said, maybe this is being wrong, and then BJ asked me the question if I'd be willing to admit wrong, and I said yes, but this time I'm right, and I'll tell you why. So we said easy input or meaningful input, and remember we asked people to type in what they did to stretch. That was the meaningful input. The easy input was just I stretched and move on. And the reason I think this is important, somebody can come up later and tell me that I'm wrong, and I'll talk to them about it, is that the exit rate from the easy input was a third. A third of people actually hit the back button and went back to the page, and they're like, what? What happened here? And it's interesting because I think that indicates that people were confused on what the purpose here was. And so sometimes, we always think, let's make it really easy for people to get through screens. Yes, but let's sometimes get them to have a chance to understand why they're there. And the meaningful input one, we ran these stats before the conference, actually caused people to take a second, type out something that they did, and recognize that there was value in just stretching. So don't always go for the easy. It still has to be easy, but a little bit of user involvement is sometimes a good thing, and we can see by the stats here. Email for help, or don't email for help. So we got some pretty good sign up here. The lesson here, though, is that emails are really hard to get from people, clearly. You have to provide a really interesting, compelling valuation to do that. But we asked at the end to get people's free-form responses and just type out what they felt. And it's just, remember, this is traffic off of AdWords on Google, and it's surprising what people type into boxes on the internet. So anyways, you can read some of these. I want to point out the third one. Except of the background shades to make the grammar is horrible. Except of the background shades to make the pages a lot funner. I think it's great and very intriguing. I would love to receive an email every day with a few different ways to stretch every day. So you're getting insights on what people are looking for just by asking that simple question. It cost us literally $300 to get this kind of information from real people. We had not so helpful responses from people. This was a mean trick. Very good. I feel hungry to do exercise. I think the last one is a bot, maybe. I have no idea what that is. So there's a lot of weird people on the internet. So I don't know what the water birth one was either. So anyways, the point here is that you always had to take this with a little bit of grain of salt. If you did everything that everybody said, you really wouldn't have anything conceivable of as product. So what would we change? We're not going to do another trial because I don't think we can get results as fast as we can through this afternoon, but I think there's 3 things that we would change through all of this. The first thing that we heard was people wanted to engage really quickly, which was awesome, but we had a video on the second page. Move the video onto the first page. Why do I have to click through to get to the video? Really simple thing that wasn't obvious at the beginning, oddly enough, and when you look at it now, that's really dumb obvious, but we spent a few $100 and figured that out pretty quickly. Have a shorter video. The video was 60 seconds. We thought 60 seconds is good. People learn all the different stretches they'll do. No, they'll pay about 10 seconds to the video. So you got to put a really short video in there and make it really easy for them to do. And as I talked about, meaningful input really frames the experience well for somebody. So don't always go for the easy one. Go for easy but important and meaningful. So now all of you are a product designer and walking around like Leela. So congratulations.
Number 1, turn on your mic, PJ. 3 more things before we break for lunch. This lunch, I'm going to challenge you again, +3. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, it's meet people during lunch, but don't talk to one person the entire lunch period. I challenge you to get 3 people so you can say, I've got to go get my +3. Awesome to meet you, and wander around, sit down at a random table, what have you. Go for the. How many people did +3 yesterday? Went for it. Awesome, do it again. And next. In the coming session, when you come back, we have a session called Walk On, Talk On. If you look at your program, there's some time for Walk On, Talk On. I know it's in my super detailed minute-by-minute program. I think it's in the more general program. What that is, it's you. It's volunteers from the audience, not speakers, to come up and say, what is my best baby step? It's your moment to share something you've done in the past or at this event. Don't be shy. Come. Find me, hand me something with your name on it, or I may actually come and recruit you. So I'll come say, do the walk on, talk on, okay? It'll be very, very short. It's like 60 seconds just to give little tidbits of inspiration and how-tos to each other. And the last one is we will have a super raffle in 56 minutes from now. We'll see you back here. Thanks, everybody.